A violent explosion of pink energy shatters the room as chains erupt from thin air, leaving the high-ranking martial artist Jang Ho trembling in absolute terror. They called Sawum a pathetic, stuttering slave of the Danry clan, but as a glowing blue status window appears with a level-up notification, the predators of the Murim realize they've become the prey. With a manic grin and his red eye glowing with feral intensity, this former insect is about to slaughter everyone in the warehouse just to see his experience bar grow. He's not just playing Murim Online anymore. He's living a reality where the weak are devoured and he's the hungriest monster in the jungle. How did a mistreated orphan suddenly gain the powers of a high-tech simulation? Let's rewind. Blood-soaked temple grounds are littered with bodies while pink petals drift under a crimson sky. The carnage is absolute. A monk offers a prayer for the dead while survivors panic, accusing demons of the massacre and spotting an approaching figure. A lone warrior in black robes strides through the gates, casually stepping over the fallen toward the survivors. Drenched in blood, the man confirms the total annihilation of the manhwa sect, acting like a total menace. Shock washes over the survivors as they recognize the warrior as a living plum blossom swordsman. Blood streams down the swordsman's face as he clarifies that a single man destroyed the entire sect. A violent explosion of red energy and petals erupts, sending the remaining warriors into absolute chaos as they scramble to mount a defense. A devastating slash cleaves through the air, sending shockwaves across the field while more blood stains the sky. A fresh line of warriors stands ready in the distance, brandishing their steel under the red horizon. Fear grips the opposition as a blade inches closer to their throats, followed by a blinding horizontal strike that cuts down anything in its path. The bearded leader roars with fury, demanding the mysterious assailant reveal himself even as the man stands in plain sight. A black boot lands firmly on the blood-slicked earth with a heavy, deliberate thud. A severed head drips blood onto the parched ground while the sprawling army watches in grim silence. The sight is absolute brutality. Grand masters from the Shaolin, Wudang, Qingcheng, and Namgung clans step forward, their expressions hardening as they prepare for the final showdown. Carrying his blade over his scarred shoulder, the black-robed figure meets the grand gathering with a look of cold indifference. A command for silence ripples through the ranks as the alliance masters take their positions. Tensions peak as a master demands an explanation for the slaughter, his eyes burning with righteous anger. The swordsman nonchalantly explains he only came because he heard this sect was the strongest before shattering the earth with a violent strike. Looking down at the remains of his victim, this certified hater expresses his disappointment that the rumors of their strength were exaggerated. The alliance masters reel in horror as they realize their leader has fallen, right before a blood-stained blade points toward their own ranks. Standing amidst drifting embers, he mocks them for needing to hunt in a pack to feel safe. He tightens his grip on the crimson blade and questions if this new group will provide a better challenge than the last one. Unable to take the insults, a master screams for silence and launches a powerful, gleaming strike to start the fight. The alliance masters stand united, vowing to end his life to avenge the fallen souls of Mount Hua. As the masters launch their combined assault, the warrior grins with blood-red eyes, finding the escalating violence genuinely entertaining. Reality shatters into digital artifacts, revealing a man with messy hair and a high-tech visor grinding out his gaming session. He adjusts the electronic headset as the red sensors pulse in his dark room. The gamer exhales and rubs his neck, wondering if he's actually capable of handling the combined might of those alliance masters. A copy of Murim Online sitting on the table reveals the truth behind the carnage. This new VR experience is infamous for its extreme brutality, leading to overwhelming public backlash and calls for its cancellation. Staring at his handheld device, the visored user realizes no other game can compete with the experience he's currently in. He watches a news report from his couch and decides his next moves need to be much more discreet. A breaking news broadcast flashes across the television, announcing that a high-ranking executive from the Dido Corporation named Mr. No has completely vanished. Deep in thought, the visored user weighs whether assassination is his best path forward, while the sound of muffled sobbing and a plea for help echoes from a dark corner of the room. Sitting in front of his glowing television, the messy-haired gamer hears a desperate voice crying out from the shadows. The visored user looks over his shoulder at the report of the missing executive and simply acknowledges the situation with a cold realization. A hand reaches out from the dim light, desperately grasping at the cold bars of a cage. Bound and covered in blood, Mr. No grovels on the floor and begs for mercy. A low vibration fills the room as the captor stands motionless over his prisoner. Bruised and streaked with tears, Mr. No looks up in absolute terror and repeats his desperate plea for salvation. The visored user crouches in the shadows, doing the most, with a heavy mallet resting on his shoulder, while he clutches his own face. Leaning in close to the executive's battered face, the gamer mockingly asks if the man truly expects help. Mr. No trembles as he is choked, swearing his innocence and claiming he has no idea why he was kidnapped. The visored user tosses several photographs onto the blood-stained floor, revealing Mr. No's history of violence. The pictures provide undeniable proof of the executive assaulting a woman and wielding a saw. Sweating and teeth clenched in terror, Mr. No stares at the evidence of his crimes and demands to know how his secrets were uncovered. Gripping the handle of his mallet, the user sarcastically remarks that an innocent man would never have become his prey. He even mutters a mock apology as he prepares to finish the job. Mr. No screams about repenting, but the captor isn't listening. A sudden, heavy blow strikes the executive's head as the user muses about how often he hears people beg for their lives. The visored user displays a wide and menacing grin, his messy hair a look of pure satisfaction. Dark silhouettes gather in a vast white void, as the captor wonders who exactly those final words of desperation were meant for. The visored user raises his heavy mallet against a vibrant purple sky, his red eye glowing with intensity as he questions if this whole routine is getting old. He tenses his muscular arm and swings the mallet downward, lighting him up with a single stroke of lethal force. A sliver of light pierces the heavy drapes of the room. The visored user stares forward with a blood-splattered grin, his triple-lensed goggles pulsing red in the dark. A lone plum blossom petal drifts gracefully through a vast white space, fluttering downward into the empty void. The delicate petal lands softly in a pool of dark blood, sending small ripples across the crimson surface. The lifeless body of a plum blossom swordsman lies on the cold stone. A dark boot steps heavily into the pooling blood, splashing the crimson liquid into the air. Petals drift past the back of a warrior's robe as he looks toward the Mount Hua temple complex under a blood-red sky. A massive army of martial artists marches through a mountain pass toward the temple. The Alliance masters lead the way, and a Shaolin monk lets out a weary sigh at the coming conflict. A dark blade slices through a thick pool of blood, while a voice questions if this broken place is truly the Mount Hua sect they once knew. In the stables, a young man with messy black hair leans on a wooden staff and nervously asks if he must leave before his cleaning is finished. A man in dark robes lunges forward and grabs the boy's jaw with a violent grip. The scarred martial artist glares with hostility and makes it clear he is not asking for permission. The scarred warrior is crashing out, lifting the young man by his throat and pinning him against a wall. He reminds the boy that he is a stuttering orphan who belongs to the Danry clan before declaring him a mere slave. The young man stares back in silent terror, his wide eye reflecting his complete helplessness as his hair falls over his face. In a workshop filled with discarded weapons, a shopkeeper greets a man named Dongo. Dongo has the young man slung over his shoulder like baggage, while the shopkeeper asks about their associate, Machill. Dongo smirks while informing the shopkeeper that Machill is busy drinking at the Phoenix Tavern with Ying Ying. He treats the boy like a piece of luggage, noting his partner's current absence. The shopkeeper looks genuinely troubled, questioning if only the two of them arrived to handle such a task. A colossal mountain of rusted blades and jagged metal fragments towers in the workshop, looking impossible for only two people to manage. Dongo lets out a hearty laugh while gesturing to the boy on his shoulder. He slams the young man onto the hard floor, declaring that they have a perfectly capable pack animal right here. Sawum huddles on the dirt, coughing from the impact while Dongo looms over him with a menacing, red-eyed glare. He barks orders for the boy to start moving the inventory, and Sawum frantically complies. Clapping his massive hands together, Dongo prepares to head out. He waves as he walks away, mentioning his own plans at the tavern and leaving the entire workload on Sawum's shoulders. Sawum remains slumped in the shadows as Dongo's voice echoes back, telling him to get to work. The shopkeeper watches the scene unfold with a look of stunned concern. Looking down with a sorrowful expression, the shopkeeper clearly pities the boy's situation. Sawum is getting dogged by the weight of a heavy sack filled with sharp, protruding weapons. The points of swords and spears begin to rip right through the worn fabric. The sack completely gives way, spilling a heap of rusted and broken blades across the floor as Sawum stumbles. Our boy drops to his knees beside the pile of scrap, looking completely drained and defeated by the brutal labor. Sawum forces himself to drag the heavy sack of weapons across the ground. Dark clouds drift through a deep red sky over the rooftops of Mount Hua. The shopkeeper looks at Sawum with concern, suggesting that the boy should take a moment to rest. Sawum stands against the crimson sky, looking so pale that the shopkeeper fears he might be on the verge of death. With sunken eyes and a sickly expression, Sawum stammers out an insistence that he is perfectly fine. Sawum gazes at the blood-red sky, while his body trembles from the biting cold. A voice cuts through the air, asking Sawum if he truly intends to keep living such a pathetic, insect-like existence. Dongo unloads a heavy elbow strike into the boy's head, jarring his entire frame. A single eye pierces through the darkness as Sawum snaps, aggressively demanding to know who the man is and telling him to get lost. Dongo is aura farming as a malevolent silhouette, red energy pulsing from his massive arms against the crimson backdrop. Broken and exhausted, Sawum offers a weak apology only to be met with a shattering impact that sends his senses reeling while he questions where his life turned for the worse. Dongo delivers a powerful kick that sends Sawum flying through the air in a flash of light. As Dongo looms over him, Sawum wonders if his downward spiral began when his family died in a typhoon, leaving him as the sole survivor. Another devastating blow crushes him, making him question if his mistake was seeking help from the Danry family simply to stay alive. Sawum lies battered on the blood-stained earth, realizing the world has been cold and unforgiving since the moment he was born. Light from a high window cuts through the gloom of a stone room where Sawum lies face down and unmoving. Sawum forces one eye open, revealing a bloodshot gaze and a glowing red iris that signals things are about to change. Waking up in a stable, the MC trembles while clutching his chest, barely managing to pull his battered body up by leaning on a nearby trough. Peering into the water, he stares at a warrior's reflection and finally connects the name Sawum to the broken body he now inhabits. A pained grunt escapes him as he leans a scarred hand against a stall for support, surveying the dim stable as light cuts through the gloom. Looking down with a heavy expression, he recognizes the layout of the stable from the original kid's fractured memories. Processing the brutal reality, he concludes the previous owner of this body was likely beaten to death before he took over. Confirming his consciousness has truly swapped into this new form, he reacts to something unexpected appearing before him. A blue glowing status window decorated with dragon motifs manifests, displaying attributes that look suspiciously familiar to him. The system officially welcomes him to Murim Online, confirming he's glitched into the interface of the game he knows. Outside the dark stable, towering pagodas and temple rooftops stretch toward a clear sky, revealing the scale of this new world. A Danry clan member stomps down the temple steps with a bowl of food, complaining loudly about the burden of cleaning up someone else's mess. He glances sideways, annoyed that the target of his frustration didn't head straight to the stables after his chores were done. The man wonders why Sawum had the bad luck of crossing paths with Peng Doring, a warrior known for a legendary temper and a terrifying aura. Machill, the scarred martial artist, grimaces, venting his rage about having to babysit someone he considers a pathetic worm. Machill towers over the boy, his long shadow stretching across the ground as he weighs his options. Staring at Sawum's tattered robes, Machill contemplates finishing the job and ending the boy's life right there. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he clicks his tongue and realizes that following through with murder is too risky for his own safety. He kicks the door open with a loud bang, shouting about the danger his own life is in if he gets caught. Machill hurls a wooden bowl at the boy, cursing him for surviving the beating and becoming such a heavy burden. Our boy stares ahead with hollow eyes, looking completely drained while messy hair fails to hide the fresh scars lining his face. Slumped next to a bowl of mystery mash, Sawum realizes 2 weeks have passed since he landed in this nightmare. Bowing his head, he reveals more jagged scars on his chest while acknowledging the time that has passed since his arrival. Gazing at the warriors training in the sunlit courtyard, he begins mentalizing all the intel he has managed to squeeze out of Machill so far. Watching the focused swordsmen during their drills, he notes the strange disconnect between their language and their actual location. He identifies the source of this world's strangeness as a blade nearby, erupts with a surge of vibrant blue energy. The culprit is martial arts, featuring the kind of physics-defying techniques that usually exist only in fiction. Warriors leap over mountains and move at blinding speeds, pushing the limits of human capability. Sawum locks in with a serious expression, his red eye trait activating and casting a crimson glow from the shadows. Watching the warriors raise their swords in a roar of determination, he accepts that these legendary arts are very much alive in this reality. Seeing the familiar fiery logo in his mind, he accepts the reality that he's living in a physical version of Murim Online. With his red eye still active, he focuses on the glowing status window, marking this system as the biggest game changer in his new life. Sawum studies the blue interface and confirms his unique advantage, realizing this private window is his alone to command. Clenching his scarred hand, Sawum feels the tremor of his own flesh and accepts that this world is no simulation. Machill glares with raw intensity, forcing Sawum to recognize that the people here possess a depth of emotion far beyond any programmed character. Machill wears a wicked grin while warriors nearby clash with terrifying realism, The blue system light reflects off Sawum's bloodshot eye, emphasizing his exhaustion. Sitting in the shadows with his system window hovering nearby, Sawum questions his own nature until an unexpected visitor interrupts his thoughts with a greeting. Leaning against a pillar at sunset, Dongo offers a mocking smile and remarks on how comfortable Sawum's life seems to be. Machill lets out a malicious sneer, blaming Sawum for his recent punishment and hurling insults at him. Dongo's massive silhouette looms over our boy, pinning him in the darkness. Dongo stares down at the seated boy with a look of pure skepticism, letting out a grunt as he takes in the scene. A bruised and battered hand strikes like a viper, snatching a bowl of grain with desperate speed. Sawum drains the bowl and feels a surge of internal power hitting different as it flows through his veins. Machill attempts to intimidate him with a lethal threat, but Sawum's eyes ignite with a crimson light that cuts him off. Machill chokes on his own breath as Sawum launches a counterattack with such blistering speed that blood sprays instantly. His red-eye trait burns with a predatory hunger while he ruthlessly crushes Machill's throat, sending a violent spray of blood across the room. Machill struggles to breathe, while Sawum informs his victim that the child he once knew has long since vanished. His eyes burn with a cold, murderous glow as he declares the death of his former self. Machill's vision fades as he gurgles in agony, his life leaking out while Sawum continues to apply a crushing force to his neck. Blood erupts from the impact as Machill's face contorts in shock. Sawum simply stares through the red mist with a wide, terrifying grin. A final, devastating strike sends a fountain of blood into the air, painting the area in a violent crimson display. Sawum stands as a dark silhouette under a rain of blood, his glowing eyes the only thing visible through the haze. Deep red liquid falls through the dark atmosphere as a heavy vibration shakes the very air around them. Blood spatters against Sawum's face, and he notes the searing heat of the liquid against his skin. Standing in the middle of a red downpour, he ponders whether he's still a human or has fully transitioned into a player. Wiping the gore from his face, Sawum embraces his glowing red vision and accepts that this world is 100% reality. A jagged mountain peak reaches toward a crimson sky as Sawum contemplates the brutal laws of this land, a truth he felt during his struggle with Machill. Chaos unfolds as blades impale warriors in a sea of flames. Amidst the carnage, a fighter with a glowing eye thrives, carving through his enemies with a manic grin. Sawum realizes the weak are merely prey for the strong. He vows to hunt to his heart's content, no longer forced to suppress his feral nature. A spectral wolf howls at a blood-red sky, symbolizing the monstrous predators roaming this world. A lone wolf watches from the ground, staring into a gateway of blinding light. Gripping his blood-stained arm, Sawum acknowledges that he stepped into a jungle where only the most vicious survive. Wearing a wide, bloody grin, he reaches toward a blinding light and swears to return to the hunt the moment his body recovers. Sawum falls away from the crimson clouds of Mount Hua, descending into a dark, starry void as the battlefield fades behind him. A brilliant full moon hangs in a star-filled sky, casting a cold light over the quiet nebulae. Sawum surveys a sprawling pagoda complex, declaring this the perfect spot to kick off his journey in the Murim. Dragging a heavy rake across the filth of the stable floor, our boy works through the pain of his bandaged ankles while the horses rest nearby. Working in total isolation, he sticks to the shadows of the quiet stable. Machill barges in and demands attention, forcing Sawum to hide his true self behind a mask of nervous submission. Expressing pure disgust at the stable's stench, Machill barks orders for Sawum to follow him. Checking his stats, Sawum realizes his inventory is a vast void and tests the waters by reaching into the glowing blue portal. Realizing the internal space is immense, he stands over a body in a room stained with blood. Testing his game knowledge, he prepares to use the storage portal on the wounded Machill. Grabbing the bloodied man by the face, he prepares to see what this ability can really do. Executing the storage command causes Machill to dissolve into a cloud of digital particles. The inventory portal swallows the large man whole, leaving the room silent once again. With his red eye glowing, Sawum realizes he has the sauce with an ability that can make anyone vanish in seconds. Pondering whether living things survive the trip into the void, he cracks a dark grin and plans for more experiments. Outside the clan buildings, the members of the Danry clan gather to rest and gossip. Machill mocks the laborers with a sinister grin, while Sawum keeps his head down and continues sweeping. Briefly dropping the act, Sawum glares at his tormentors with eyes full of cold, red intent. Machill catches him off guard with a heavy strike to the back of the head. Insulting Sawum for being unable to speak, Machill laughs, while our boy plays the part of a mindless fool. Prodding him aggressively, Machill warns him not to slack off for even a second. Ordered to take a horse for a walk, Sawum bows deeply and grunts to maintain his perfect cover. Machill vents his frustration at dealing with a subordinate who can't even offer a proper response. Walking through the bustling town streets, he leads the horse calmly under the bright morning sun. Merchants tend to their stalls and cook food over open flames as the marketplace comes to life. Peering through his messy hair, Sawum keeps a watchful eye on every movement in the crowd. Bullies emerge from a dark alley and launch a surprise attack. Taking a rock directly to the head, Sawum refuses to react and keeps his head bowed like a broken man. Enduring the physical abuse, he looks absolutely cooked with blood and scratches covering his face. The children mock him for his silence until a terrifying shadow falls over them, freezing the lead bully in his tracks. Looming over the kids with his red eyes glowing, Sawum shows them he's built different as the predator behind the mask finally comes out to play. The lead bully is completely broken, weeping in distress after that unsettling encounter. Sawum wanders through the market under the sun, mumbling incoherently while the villagers watch with confusion as he leads his horse past them. A man lets out a mocking laugh at the sight of the local weirdo. Jeers and insults follow our boy as he walks on, mocked as the local mute as the background shifts into a dark, blood-red shadow. Voices of the past continue to haunt him with insults as he stands motionless under a heavy crimson glow. Heavy boots step across the dry ground, moving with a steady pace. Machill grumbles to himself about the annoyance of cleaning weapons and wonders if Guak Dongo has finally kicked the bucket somewhere. Surprising the lazy blacksmith, Sawum steps out of the building with a blank face. Machill peers inside the workshop, finding every blade polished to a perfect, brilliant shine. Staring in shock, Machill asks if the kid did all his work for him while Sawum just offers a wide, unsettling grin in response. Machill reflects on how that near-death experience turned Sawum into a model worker who does extra tasks without being told. Our legend mumbles a low sound and offers a brown pouch with that same creepy smile. Opening the bag reveals a stack of gold coins, sending Machill into a state of pure disbelief. Machill lets out a boisterous laugh, thrilled that the kid finally understands how the world works. Giving a friendly slap on the shoulder, Machill tells him to keep it up while he greedily clutches his new treasure. Sawum watches from a distance, his eyes glowing with a faint, predatory red light. Sawum dismisses the man as a fool, thinking that this gold is actually a down payment for his journey to the afterlife. Walking through town at sunset, Machill brags about the benefits of being flexible and knowing how to handle money. He shakes the rattling pouch, enjoying the weight of a full pocket. Feeling like a high roller, he decides to skip his usual girl for the more expensive Chosian. Pouch in hand, he arrives at the Phoenix Tavern just as the sun goes down. The attendant greets him with a massive smile, and Machill immediately demands the presence of the top beauty. The host hesitates at the unusual request before regaining his composure. Machill doubles down with an aggressive grin, making the attendant eye him with sudden suspicion. Tossing the heavy pouch over to settle any doubts, Machill gets directed to the best room on the second floor. Drinking alone in the dimly lit room, he jumps when Chosian finally makes her entrance. He struggles to keep his cool, completely floored by her beauty as he invites her to sit. Chosian kneels to pour his drink, leaving Machill wide-eyed with excitement. He laughs with pure joy, losing himself in the moment while admiring her delicate hands. Machill beckons his guest closer, unaware that a glowing crimson eye is tracking his every move through a gap in the partition. The watcher remains fixed on the gap, while Machill persists with his invitations, coaxing his guest to bridge the distance. Sawum peers through the wood, his features bathed in the eerie light of his activated eye. A beam of light cuts through the darkness to reveal a room painted in fresh blood, covering both the walls and the heavy door. Looking drained, Sawum leans his weight against the blood-stained wood to catch his breath. His gaze sharpens as he evaluates his target, deciding that despite the man's insignificance, a single lingering detail demands confirmation. He glances back at the body cooling in a pool of blood before summoning a glowing blue portal to access his spatial storage. Surveying the glowing interface, he browses through his collected loot while noting a strange shift in his surroundings. Machill looms over Sawum, mockingly labeling him a mute and demanding to know if he understands his current situation before threatening him to leave. Machill freezes when Sawum suddenly presents a small cloth pouch right in front of his face. Struggling to form the words, Sawum mumbles a name while Machill leans in, his burning curiosity piqued by the bundle in those bandaged hands. The pouch opens to reveal a stack of bronze coins, leaving Machill staring in sheer, wide-eyed disbelief at the unexpected payday. Wearing a greedy grin, Machill promises to deliver Ying immediately if Sawum waits in the designated upstairs room. Under the warm glow of a red lantern, Machill walks off satisfied while Sawum heads into the tavern toward the guest quarters. Machill starts bragging about his own stamina, completely missing the shadow with glowing eyes closing in to loop a wire around his neck. That smug smile doesn't stand a chance, as Sawum's bandaged hands pull the trap tight against the back of his neck. The reality of the situation hits with a sharp jerk as the metal wire cuts deep into his throat. Machill struggles to draw breath, his face twisting into a mask of agony while he desperately tries to claw at the source of the pressure with labored groans. When Machill tries to demand an identity, Sawum answers with crushing force, absolutely folding him backward so hard that blood sprays across the floor. Using his whole body for leverage, Sawum whips the man through the air before slamming him face first into the floorboards with a bone-shattering impact. Sawum stares down his prey with an eye that burns a terrifying crimson. The struggle finally ends as Machill gasps one last time before his body goes completely limp under the overwhelming strength of the wire. Sawum looms over the fallen martial artist, wearing a manic grin as he keeps the wire buried deep in his neck. A chilling laugh escapes him, while his bloodshot eye stays fixed on the unconscious man at his feet. His eyes pierce the darkness like a predator as he braces himself against the wood, signaling the end of the hunt. Looking straight up demonic, Sawum sits there grinning while cradling the limp weight of his target against his chest. Resting on the floor, Sawum looks completely satisfied with his work as the world begins to dissolve into a white haze. While Chosian remains motionless on the bedding, Sawum continues to crouch over the defeated Machill. Chosian lies curled up on the floor, her dark hair spilling out around her in the silence of the room. Sawum sits in the shadows with his head bowed, looking completely drained but focused. His gaze remains fixed on Chosian as she lies unconscious in the dark room, totally unaware of the predator watching her. Standing over her, Sawum notes her complete lack of defense, viewing her as nothing more than a fragile creature with no power to save herself. Our boy starts moving through the dark hallway, nonchalantly carrying Machill's severed head by the hair as if it's a grocery bag. He stops at a narrow gap in the wall, peering through the sliver of light to scout the next room. A blue light erupts as Sawum triggers his inventory, reaching his bandaged hand into the system's space to store his grim trophy. While clutching his blade, Sawum calculates how his new abilities will streamline his future hunts. His weary eyes narrow, focusing intensely on the blue interface that flickers to life before him. The system window reveals categories for his combat stats, though his specific techniques remain shrouded in mystery for now. He confirms his level 1 status, scanning through the menu icons and tracking his progress on the experience bar. It finally clicks for Sawum that taking lives in this world is the direct path to gaining more power. Staring at the wooden walls, he realizes that stacking enough experience will eventually turn him into an unstoppable force. Sawum breaks into a wide-eyed grin, his red eyes beaming with hype as the thrill of the system takes hold. He looks at his bandaged hands, already planning how to maximize his efficiency to speed up the leveling process. Lying on the floor, he clutches his head and laughs at the realization that his potential for growth is literally infinite. Sawum praises the nature of this world before tightening a strip of cloth between his hands as he looms over a body. He frames his target through his fingers, his eyes locking onto the man as he prepares his next move. Machill lies slumped against the wall, eyes rolled back and completely out of commission. Out in the hall, a man in maroon robes crosses his arms and regrets not being able to capture the scene. Ying rushes down the corridor, breathing hard as she checks if the clients have already started. The man snaps at her for being late, ordering her inside while noting that even a mute customer is still a paying priority. Ying offers a quick apology, while the man keeps his stern focus on the door. Frustrated by the wait, the man wonders if the pair inside is trying to start a family before clearing his throat to get their attention. He pounds on the door, demanding Machill and Chosian wrap things up since they've been in there forever. Total silence meets his shouting, causing the man's temper to flare as he suspects he's being ignored on purpose. A piercing scream from the room stops him cold, and he slams the door open with a look of pure panic. Chosian is found huddled on the floor, shaking with absolute terror as she tries to hide behind a blanket. The man's face contorts in horror at the sight, while a dark silhouette aura farming in the shadows chills the entire room. Machill is dead, his body left swinging from a ceiling beam in a brutal display of the MC's work. Chosian is a wreck on the floor, while the man who discovered the body stands there completely frozen by the sight. Rewinding to a blood-red sunset, a promise is made to deliver Chosian to the second floor while Machill is left stuttering in total shock. The Phoenix Tavern glows under that deep crimson sky as Machill heads inside, unaware that Dongo is tracking his every move from the shadows. Watching from afar, Dongo can't help but feel disgusted that Machill is going after someone young enough to be his own daughter. Prying open a heavy pouch reveals a mountain of gold coins, and Dongo's greed takes the wheel as he decides that the money itself isn't a sin. Machill looks toward the door to see a dark figure framed against the twilight. He tries to start a greeting, but his voice fails when he recognizes Sawum's messy hair. Heavy footsteps echo through the tavern as the silhouette closes the distance between him and the Danry clan members. The Danry clan's Black Crow squad is built different when it comes to gathering intel, making even the beggar sect look like amateurs in the Anhui region. The Black Crow Hall is currently hitting a wall with a bizarre new case that has the entire squad struggling. Deep inside the hall, a subordinate bows low to hand over a purple scroll containing the latest report to his commander. Gidihio, the leader of the Black Crow squad, looks like he's seen a ghost after reading what's on that paper. He stares blankly at the report, realizing that this wave of supposed suicides is spreading like a literal plague. Gripping the scroll tight, Dihio processes the fact that nearly 100 people have died in recent months, and every single case is suspiciously perfect. Narrowing his eyes, he focuses on the tiny details of the death reports that refuse to add up. He shuts his eyes to think, doubting the official story because there's no way every single death could be a flawless suicide. Digging into the history, Dihio asks about the first victim and learns it was an armory artisan from the clan named Machill. His focus intensifies at the mention of the Danry clan, and he immediately demands to know the exact spot where Machill supposedly ended his life. The investigation leads straight to the Phoenix Tavern, a massive multi-story inn where the tragedy first began. Dihio prepares to head out immediately, ignoring his subordinate's surprise that the squad leader is handling this personally. He peers through the doorframe with laser focus, needing to see the layout of the Phoenix Tavern with his own eyes. Standing in front of the latticed doors, Dihio confirms they've reached the right room as his subordinate describes the grim sight of finding Machill hanging from the rafters. His gaze sharpens as he silently breaks down every possibility of how someone could have staged this. He questions if this suicide plague is actually a string of murders, scanning the reinforced wall vents for any sign of a break-in. Dihio pushes through the ornate doors and steps onto the dark floorboards, his footsteps echoing through the hollow room. After searching every inch for a killer's entry point, he realizes there is only one way someone could have gotten in. His eyes lock onto a tiny, dark slit hidden between the thick logs that make up the tavern's wall. Pressing his hand against the timber, he realizes moving these logs would provide a way in, but he hits a major obstacle. Examining the heavy vertical timber, he concludes that these logs haven't been touched or moved in years. Dihio looks for a way to pry the logs out without collapsing the roof, but the worker explains they are locked tight into deep grooves. It seems the structure is built in a way that makes moving the timber physically impossible. With a hand on his black robes, Dihio starts to wonder if this really was a case of someone taking their own life. Turning to the mustached worker in red, Dihio asks about the neighbors and learns that another guest checked in at the exact same time as the victim. His gaze turns sharp as he demands to know the identity of that other guest. Wisps of white drift through an endless blue sky, offering a brief moment of peace. Sawum stands in the middle of a crowded market, holding the reins of his horse while keeping his head down. Looking over his status window, Sawum realizes his recent kill gave him a massive boost in experience points compared to his previous targets. His dark eyes focus as he tries to piece together the identity of the person he killed. Gripping the reins until his knuckles turn white, he realizes he must have taken out a genuine martial artist. He knows that taking down strong opponents is the only way to grow, especially since he is currently weaker than the lowest members of his clan. A man laughs in his face, mocking his looks, while Sawum silently resolves to hunt down more high-level prey to close the gap. 5 men surround him in a dark room, their leader demanding a proper greeting while the others mock his silence. Leaning in with a toothless grin, the leader tries to act like they are on friendly terms to lower his guard. Sawum meets the provocation with a cold, unwavering stare that does not show a hint of fear. Looking at these street thugs, he reminds himself that despite his status, he still carries the blood of his clan. Watching the man's smug face, Sawum wonders why he spent his whole life being pushed around by trash like this. One of the thugs grabs Sawum by the hair, dragging him away for what they call a private conversation. In a cramped warehouse, Sawum is forced to the ground while he calmly plans how to murder everyone in the room and stage it as a suicide. A red light flares in his eye as he looks up with a look of pure, focused intensity. He considers using his inventory to hide the evidence, but decides these guys are too mid to even bother with for the experience points. Our boy decides to play the long game, opting to take a beating now so he can eliminate them properly later. A heavy punch lands, and the thugs mock him for living too well, but Sawum is already calculating their ends. A silhouette in the doorway calls for an end to the violence, questioning why Sawum was not brought in quietly as instructed. A man with a goatee and a subtle smile steps into the light, looking completely in control of the situation. The thugs start shaking at the sight of Jang-ho, while Sawum memorizes the face of this new threat. Jang-ho starts petting the horse, mentioning how the leader of the dark society has a thing for fine animals. He looks at Sawum with a malicious, predatory grin, aura farming, while he treats the boy like a piece of property. Sawum narrows his eyes, picking up on the murderous intent rolling off Jang-ho. He sees right through the plan to take his horse, realizing this guy picked the wrong while Jang-ho continues to underestimate the boy's sharp mind. Leaning in with an intimidating scowl, Jang-ho demands answers without hesitation. Sawum doesn't even flinch, his scarred face twisted into a look of pure defiance as he tells the man to finish the job instead of wasting breath. Jang-ho completely loses his cool, his eyes nearly popping out of his head as he realizes the kid he thought was silent actually has a voice. Sawum triggers his inventory, and a swirling blue portal of digital energy rips open. A heavy force surges out of the gateway, slamming into Jang-ho with a blinding flash. Blood sprays across Jang-ho's face as he staggers back, unable to process how this is happening. A blood-stained hand reaches out for a dark blade buried in a shoulder, teeth gritted against the pain. The light from the inventory portal is so intense it silhouettes everything, releasing a crushing wave of power that leaves everyone watching in total disbelief. A violent eruption of energy washes over the scene, consuming the entire area in a brilliant white and pink flash. Debris flies everywhere as the explosion tears the surroundings apart. Jang-ho recoils in terror, screaming as he identifies the chains closing in on him. Right in the middle of the chaos, the Murim Online system pings with a notification, confirming our boy hit level 2. Jang-ho is sweating buckets now, staring at the raw power unfolding in front of him with one wide, terrified eye. Standing in the center of the wreckage is a dark silhouette, wrapped in a malevolent purple glow and swirling red energy that screams danger. Panic screams fill the air as the thugs realize they are dealing with a monster, labeling the boy a demon while their leader frantically orders everyone to strike him down. This kid is straight up on demon mode. Shifting gears to the Anhui region, where the Hua and Yangtze rivers carve through the land to create an expansive, fertile plain. It is a land of great wealth and trade, which naturally draws in thieves as the unorthodox faction begins to spread its influence. To keep the peace, several Murim sects have stepped up, including the legendary Namgung clan and the rising Danry clan. The Danry clan has carved out a name for itself in Anhui, mostly thanks to its heavy-hitting Cross-Heaven sword division and the intelligence experts of the Black Crow Squad. A man with a chipped tooth gasps for air, his lungs burning from total exhaustion as he struggles to stay on his feet. Drenched in sweat, a bald man in robes sprints through a storage area toward a flickering orange light, his face twisted in confusion as he questions the chaos. He barrels through the dark corridor past rows of crates, shouting in absolute disbelief as he catches sight of something horrifying. The man keeps sprinting toward the light at the end of the narrow hall, his voice cracking as he begs for anyone to save him from the threat on his heels. A brutal strike connects with a man in dark robes, painting the wall with a spray of blood, while the bald survivor collapses onto the floorboards, groaning as he watches the light.